Jason Statham is well known for being a tough guy who performs his own stunts. However, a different story is told behind the cameras. Medical records revealing the true cost of his perilous career came to light in 2025. Concussions, fractured wrists that never fully healed, and shattered ribs. Rosie, his wife, recently insisted that he cease performing semantics. Why? Because they were both frightened by what the physicians told them. After surviving numerous battles, bee stings, and drowning, the man finally faces his greatest foe to far. And he can't battle his way out of it this time. On July 26, 1967, he was born in Shirebrook, Derbyshire, a town that offered no ambitions but work that broke people's hearts and spirits. The terrain and the lungs of the men who labored there were transformed by coal mining. Jason Statham entered a world where comfort was secondary to survival. Born in 1939, his father, Barry Statham, had endured the worst winters and the most depressing wages in Britain. Barry was balancing everything that brought in money by the time Jason was born. In the Canary Islands, when local employment dried up, people turned to house painting, coal mining, street hawking, and even lounge singing. He was not afforded the luxury of choice. He did it if it paid. Eileen Yates, Jason's mother, was a talented dancer who added vigor and rhythm to an otherwise sour working-class routine. While her husband battled for money on the streets, she sang under cheap spotlights in taverns and dimly lit cafes. Jason was a spectator in both universes. He witnessed dirt, flair, stage lights, and struggle. Their house was in good condition. It simply wouldn't stop moving. Jason kept time on the drums, Barry would sing, and his brother Lee played guitar. It was similar to their own tiny program, which was born out of need rather than celebrity. They relocated to Great Yarmouth, a seaside town crowded with tourists, stalls, and noise, leaving Shirebrook behind when they were 10 years old. Barry opened up shop once more, this time in open marketplaces, where he sold low-cost items to anyone walking by. The labor was unrelenting, rapid, and dangerous. Jason watched him and learned everything: when to press and when to back off, how to read people. He had the option to work there full-time, but he chose not to. He made a different decision: martial arts. Jason pushed himself into training when he was 11. Chinese martial arts, kickboxing, and karate. By practicing every day, he managed to regulate all of the pressure inside of him. Later, there was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Krav Maga, and Muay Thai. He earned his black belt in karate and became proficient in grips like Kesagatam and throws like Seo Najing. The self-control prevented him from getting into trouble. He was sharper than others because of it. He was accurate in addition to being strong. And he had power because of his accuracy. He met up with Vinnie Jones at school. Back then, they were just boys with cleats and tenacity. They weren't renowned. Jason was a forward between 1978 and 1983. He received additional discipline on the football field: timing, strategy, and teamwork. Sport wasn't the only thing. In a world that offered no promises, it was an additional means of survival and control. He carried that mindset with him throughout all of his endeavors. Jason added diving as an extra activity when he reached 12. Not for amusement, but for work. He spent 12 years training with the Great Britain national swimming team, becoming proficient in 1M, 3M, and 10M dives. He participated in the 1990 Commonwealth Games in New Zealand. At the age of 23, he finished in the 10 naming tweeter platform in 12th place, the 1 naming in 8th place, and the 3 men in 11th place. He only received a score of 13.86 on one dive. He received a 0.5 from an English judge. It hurt. He knew why he didn't qualify for the Olympics. He was too late to begin. But he was refined even by that defeat. He continued to work part-time with his father, selling jewels and counterfeit perfume. While he was in training, the weekend hustling wasn't enjoyable. Survival was relentless and difficult. Hoping someone would purchase what you were selling while standing on curbs in all types of weather. Modeling felt like a way out when it called. He secured campaigns for Tommy Hilfiger, Griffin, and Levis between 1996 and 1997. Although it didn't pay well and didn't go very quickly, it appeared to be a success. Then everything was different. Guy Ritchie needed someone who could portray a true hustler because he was casting for Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. A person who didn't have to act. Someone who had genuinely made a living selling goods on the street. Jason wasn't quite correct. The role was him. For playing Bacon, he was paid $5,000. The movie blew up. He received $15,000 for Snatch 2 years later. His career took off because he had already experienced it, not because he had learned how to act. Jason Statham represented England in the 1990 Commonwealth Games in Auckland. Standing on the edge of a diving board, he finished 11th in the 3m and 10m dives, and 9th in the 1-meter event. Medals were not awarded for those scores, but something else emerged from the sea: his presence, his balance, and his body. A scout at Crystal Palace in London noticed that presence. Shortly thereafter, in 1996, he was paid $5,000 per campaign by Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, and Griffin to stand in front of a camera rather than leap from a platform. Though it didn't go very far in London, that money sounded nice. He had been picked by modeling, not the other way around. And the only reason the jobs were coming was because his body still had the appearance of an athlete's. By 1997, French Connection had grown tired of models with a model's appearance. They desired a more rugged individual who did not conform to the fashion standard. Statham's raw was just right. He became the face of their FQ campaign because of his buzzed haircut, squared jaw, and no-nonsense glare. Posters of him gazing from shop fronts and alley walls were all throughout the city. Yet the annual salary was barely $10,000. It wasn't enough to advance, just enough to hang on. Like his father, he hustled despite having a famous face and a half-empty fridge. He imitated the scams he had witnessed as a youngster, and sold counterfeit jewelry and perfume on Oxford Street. Tourists were deterred by a quick anecdote, a display of confidence, and a charm offensive. On some days, he earned $200. It was money for survival. However, it wasn't secure. He gave 2 buyers who later turned out to be undercover police officers a fake Rolex in 1996. He remained calm. He grinned. He made a joke. Pure conversation got him past the cuffs. He learned something from that escape. When the pressure builds, remain motionless, speak, and take charge of the situation. He would eventually use that composed resistance as a defining characteristic in all of his movie auditions. However, music videos existed before movies, coming on as a rave-style video that the Shaman shot in 1993. Glistening in leopard shorts, Statham danced in Brighton under club lights, spontaneous and unplanned. Eraser reappeared half-naked in the 1994 movie, Run to the Sun. This time, he was on a beach in a golden cage, moving in tune with the music, as if he was made for the camera rather than the pool. He has not yet been referred to be an actor. He was merely a moving body. However, a change was occurring. Guy Ritchie was searching for authenticity in 1997. He didn't want actors with a lot of polish. He desired a street. He was looking for someone who could convince him of a falsehood. Statham arrived with a hustle rather than a CV. On the spot, Ritchie asked him to sell counterfeit items. He got the role because he performed it so brilliantly. It wasn't a stretch for Bacon, a streetwise gambler with 2 smoking barrels and lock, stock. Jason was just being himself. He received $20,000. More than any perfume scam, but not much. It also had credits for the first time. It was a chaotic movie. With a budget of $800,000, the film was shot at actual East End pubs, and the actors improvised sequences, while the crowd jeered in the background. Statham relied more on instincts than on lines. In one scene, he used a shotgun to smash a car window, mimicking battles he had previously avoided in real life. Nothing, not even the nerves, was artificial. That was something Ritchie promoted. The chaos turned into magic. However, producers almost cut Statham out after he finished filming Rap. His accent was described as unrefined because it was too rough and East End. Ritchie resisted giving up. He struggled to preserve Jason's authentic, unpolished voice. Lock Stock made Statham's scowl instantly identifiable, and made £3.9 million when it came out in theaters in the UK. In August 1998, Ritchie summoned him back for Snatching 2 years later. He wasn't a supporting character this time. He portrayed Turkish, the boxing promoter who navigated a diamond robbery and gang conflicts. $10 million was added to the budget. There were more lines, more stunts, and more bruises for Statham. During one fight scene in an abandoned gym in London, he cracked 2 ribs. No complaints, no stuntman. Benicio del Toro and Brad Pitt were among the cast. And the mayhem was genuine. They filmed in dilapidated buildings and alleys. It appeared as though each frame had been pulled out of the ground. The movie made $83.6 million worldwide. The same visage that used to gaze from cheap perfume booths was now featured on movie posters all over the world. However, not everything went as planned behind the scenes. Statham improvised a threat directed at Del Toro's character during the 1999 reshoots. It was improv, although Del Toro was unaware of it. It seemed personal to him. The tension blew up. Words were exchanged. To calm things down, Ritchie had to intervene. The tension made it scream, but that conflict never did. Between the lines, there was something unsaid that made their scenes brittle. Statham later acknowledged that he nearly went too far. However, he always walked that line, real, unvarnished, and dangerous. Jason Statham was keen to show that action heroes didn't require wires, computer-generated imagery, or stunt doubles when he arrived on the set of The Transporter in 2002. Everything changed after a single scene at a filthy bus station. He repelled assailants for 15 grueling takes while covered in oil. It wasn't a show. He performed every kick, every fall, and every action himself. By the end, his ribs were so damaged that breathing was painful. No camera trickery were used. Before the cameras had started rolling, he had received 2 months of martial arts instruction from director Corey Yuen. And one of the movie's most talked about scenes resulted from that preparation. The oil fight appeared to be real, yet it was. That kind of risk was not something that happened once. The scenes involving the automobile pursuit were considerably more dramatic. With a $20 million budget and a realistic concept, Statham agreed to a deal that prohibited the use of stunt doubles for driving. That's him driving when you watch him reversing through Marseille's congested, winding streets at around 80 mph. No controlled track, no green screen. In order to prevent catastrophes, the crew had to shoot during local rush hour. It would have ended in sirens and mangled metal with one incorrect turn, but it didn't. With a global box office receipt of $43.5 million, his legend was established. Transporter 2 upped the ante 3 years later. Statham used only suction cups to scale a 10-story structure in Miami. No backup, no wires. The hold slipped halfway up. He plummeted 20 feet. He spent a week in the hospital due to the severity of his ankle sprain. A stunt double was used to close out the scenario, but the harm had already been done. Refusing to give up, he hobbled through situations that required strength and quickness. Later, director Louis C.A. acknowledged that the stunt should never have been tried without unsuccessful rescues. However, Statham's career was on the verge of ending because of that call. The plane battle followed. He fought turbulence in a virtual jet with actual G-force hydraulics in the Transporter 2 climax. It was cramped, disorganized, and very challenging to choreograph. Off-camera, however, a different kind of conflict was taking place. Due to cultural differences, his co-star Shui declined a pre-arranged kiss. Midway through the production, the sequence had to be reworked. Reshoots are scheduled. Dialogue is discarded. They managed to keep the flow going even though the stress could have broken it. Despite this, the film maintained its high-octane image and made $85.1 million. He was taken to Ukraine by Transporter 3 in 2008 for one of the riskiest feats to date. He ran across difficult roads, collided with actual obstacles, and pushed through scenes without the use of computer techniques, while handcuffed to a truck and suffering from a dislocated shoulder. Each blow was more forceful than the last. Although the violence was criticized by critics as being too extreme, the stats showed that people enjoyed the rawness. $18.5 million globally. It was a painful procedure. He never requested a stand-in, even though it took months for his shoulder to heal completely. He simply continued. In the same year, he starred in the heist movie, The Bank Job, which was based on the theft at Lloyd's Bank in 1971. The team discovered during production that MI5 papers related to the actual theft had just recently been declassified. A government cover-up involving stolen images of a member of the royal family was revealed by the documents. The stakes changed. MI5 kept an eye on the set. Security was hired by the producers. All of a sudden, the story seemed more true than imagined. It shook people. However, it also made news. Being a thief wasn't all that Statham was doing. He was recounting a tale that the administration attempted to conceal. Death Race displayed that same fearlessness. Statham performed his own burnouts without gloves, while racing armored automobiles at high speeds. The hot metal burned his hands. In one scene, Statham crashed into a prop that was decapitating a guard with full power. It was almost blocked by the MPAA. The producers resisted the producers' demands for changes, and the film's most graphic sequence was published unaltered. It brought in $75.8 million. Critics also criticized it for being nearly too real. Statham's staff repeatedly reminded him to wear protective gear. He didn't. Even if it hurt, he wanted it raw. Then the conflict broke out. In a well-practiced scene, Jet Li and Jason Statham clashed swords. Statham's arm was slashed open by the blade after just one slip. There was blood, 12 stitches. He ought to have halted. Rather, he continued to film for another 12 hours. His clothes adhered to the injury. Production was to be stopped, the director offered. No, he responded. That scar never went away. The tale didn't either. He wasn't acting, it served as a reminder. He was persevering. The danger followed him even outside of the Transporter series. He navigated the La Metro tunnels in a Mini Cooper while working in Italy. They shot it with around 200 takes and 32 automobiles. One then submerged. Statham was stuck in a flooded tunnel after a rig malfunctioned. He was seconds away from drowning when the crew pulled him out. Later on, he acknowledged that it was the closest he had ever been to death on a set. He said, "I shouldn't have done it, but he did." And things became much more crazy and crank. He portrayed a hitman who had to maintain his level of adrenaline or perish. Thus, he swerved through actual traffic on the 110 and dashed over actual Los Angeles highways without barricades. Automobiles veered. One struck the other. Filming ceased. There were lawsuits. The photo made the final edit, but the crew bought off irate drivers. It was memorable, risky, and hazardous. The story was the turmoil, not just a part of it. Jason Statham understood the movie would be a crazy blend of ego, explosions, and vintage action when he joined the Expendables in 2010 to play knife-throwing mercenary Lee Christmas. However, 3 years later, he almost drowned, which was unexpected. His flatbed truck's brakes failed in 2013 while he was filming Expendables 3 in Bulgaria. The car blasted into the Black Sea from a dock. Statham slipped through a window and swam free after being trapped, drowning, and tangled in his own holster, only seconds away from blacking out. He described it as an unpleasant experience that altered his perspective on stunts. However, he didn't stop. After changing, he returned to the set. He was able to live because he had participated in the Commonwealth Games as a competitive diver. His life was saved by that background. If Jason didn't know how to swim like that, he was a goner. Sylvester Stallone subsequently stated simply. The incident led to litigation and made the crew re-evaluate production-wide safety. Getting too real wasn't the first time. Statham aimed for authenticity in 2011 while filming The Mechanic, a remake centered on precision assassinations. He declined to employ computer-generated imagery to simulate explosions, which contributed to the budget skyrocketing to $50 million. A stunt coordinator was hurt when one actual blast went wrong. Another almost struck him. Later, the filmmaker acknowledged that Statham's request to employ realistic effects enhanced the grit on screen at the expense of actual blood. The stunts and the accidents only increased in danger as the sequel came out. Statham had his first full-length appearance as Deckard Shaw in the 2013 film Fast and Furious 6. Driving an automobile off a 260-foot ramp in a scene designed to resemble a plane crash was one of the last feats. Winchar flipped the car on the day of the shoot. Statham spent 2 weeks in the hospital after suffering whiplash. He later described the injuries as a reminder of how little control you actually have in those situations, and considered it one of the riskiest things he had ever done. The Mag, a high-budget shark thriller with a prehistoric bite, followed in 2018. He almost died doing one underwater stunt. He was stuck 45 feet below the surface when the gear broke under pressure while he was recording in a diving cage. 45 seconds passed before he managed to extricate himself. Despite the genuine alarm, he remained composed, surfaced, and continued. No retreat, no double. With a global box office total of $530 million, the $150 million picture became one of the most successful shark movies ever produced. According to Statham, the shoot was frightful in a manner that battle sequences were never. Sharks don't follow instructions. The resurrection in mechanics. He advanced that way of thinking in 2016. He is seen mounting a Malaysian building without safety gear in one of the movie's most memorable scenes. He really did it in real life. Early takes were conducted without harnesses. He slipped, dropped 30 feet, and hit concrete with a harsh landing. Production was stopped due to the concussion, and scenes had to be rewritten. He persisted, but he later discreetly acknowledged that many injuries of such nature were dismissed on the set. According to him, stunt actors put their lives on the line every day and barely get noticed. Many people believed that safety was more stringent following the Crow disaster. However, there was still some element of risk on Statham's sets. Stunts were not the only source of danger. Things became strained in 2015 when director Paul abruptly rewrote the script for Spy, a witty comedy that parodied his typical tough guy persona. After a day on the set, Statham left. The $65 million production was rocked by the altercation. According to crews, that was the only instance in which they witnessed Statham really lose his temper. He came back, and his performance, which combined action, grit, and deadpan timing, was one of the most acclaimed in the movie. However, it also demonstrated his uneasiness of breaking tight. He hit 100 Mattis Tempin on a motorcycle during a chase scene when filming Hobbs and Shaw in Samoa the same year. His wrist was broken when the bike hit a pothole and threw him across the pavement. He continued. No double was called in by him. After recovering, he returned to do the stunt. His refusal to fake anything, according to crew workers, aroused both loyalty and concern in equal measure. He began to come under fire in the 2010s for turning down dramatic roles. He claimed he didn't enjoy portraying weak characters when he declined an audition for The Dark Knight. It was deemed short-sighted by some, yet it was effective. He established a $20 million per film brand based only on box office figures, scars, and fists rather than accolades. He once remarked, "I'm not here to act like someone else. I'm here to show what happens when someone pushes back." On a photo shoot in 1997, before all the fame, he met model Kelly Brook. They dated for 7 years before he proposed in 2004. She called it quits a few weeks later after being pictured on the French Riviera with Billy Zane. Then came model Sophie Daw, who claimed that his training regimens and filming schedules made him emotionally distant. Brook later said that they might have lasted if they weren't in the spotlight. Statham was devastated, and his friends said he felt humiliated. He never talked about it publicly except once, when he said he felt like a cuckold, and it stuck with him. They dated for 6 months in 2005. They broke up by August 2006. She later claimed that while the passion was genuine, the future was not. He met Rosie Huntington-Whiteley in 2010, and they quickly went public. But in 2011 they split up after a fight at the Transformers premiere. They reunited, but a high-speed paparazzi chase in Los Angeles almost destroyed their reconciliation. Statham was away filming Meg 2 in 2020 for months, and Rosie said the distance almost broke them. They began therapy, which helped, and they learned how to protect each other from the spotlight and themselves. Rosie said it was the moment they realized fame could literally be deadly. They stayed together, and in 2017 they had a son, Jack Oscar. The invasions continued, and in January 2024, the Beekeeper opened quietly and exploded. In 2022, they purchased a $14 million mansion in Beverly Hills, and by 2023 drones were flying over their backyard, one of which came within inches of a window, which Rosie said made her demand stunt limits. Statham once threw a shoe at a drone, but it didn't help. It made $162 million in a $40 million budget, and Statham, who played a retired assassin hunting scammers, performed every scene himself, despite being allergic to bees, carrying EpiPens with him and experiencing mild reactions on set, never using a double, and claimed that beekeeping was scarier than anything he had ever done. Before the year ended, a sequel was approved. Behind the scenes, Statham trained 12 young stunt performers, taught them safety procedures, and insisted on on-set medical staff for his 2025 role in David Ayer's A Working Man, which topped the MGM Plus charts. He had been hospitalized for 3 days in 2023 for a different project and didn't want anyone else to experience that. By 2025, his films had earned over $8.5 billion worldwide, with The Meg earning $530 million, Hobbs and Shaw earning $760 million, and the Expendables franchise surpassing $1.2 billion. However, his greatest regret was not monetary. He declined to try out for James Bond in 2006 because the studio deemed him too old at 39. He rewrote what an action hero could be after being rejected, saying in 2024 that he should have fought harder. In 2020, he donated £1 million to UK diving programs, claiming that diving gave him purpose and kept him off the streets as a teenager. By 2022, more than 1,000 scholarships had been funded. In 2025, he was the victim of death hoaxes, claiming that he drowned in a Texas flood and died in a car accident. They were all fake. He posted vacation photos from Italy while his obituary was featured in headlines, which became a joke and a reminder that people are always watching, even when they shouldn't be. He finished filming Leavens Trade in 2025, which was based on Chuck Dixon's novel and written by Sylvester Stallone. It is darker, less ostentatious, and more intimate, and it is intended to change Statham's image once more. It is released on January 17, 2025, and stars him as Levon Cade, a reserved former Special Forces soldier who is lured back into warfare.